can, I'll share the 5-year plan, Jeff, when I speak to it.
All right, the working session begins, and I guess, Todd, you got the floor.
All right, let me share my screen. All right, can you see that okay?
Yep.
Okay, so what we have here is our projected fund balances by fund balance category. Let me just highlight this one. This is the one that we're most concerned about and the one that we manage from a fiscal health standpoint. The other ones are fund balances for like operating capital, student activities, and so on. So FY23, we ended with a deficit fund balance of $102,350, and we went through and we revised the FY24 budget and tightened things up as much as we could. And it looks like we will end FY24 if we can hit our budget at a fund balance of $84,862, and then we factored in adjustments of $750,000 budget cuts, which would get us to a fund balance of $625,004 in FY25, and we grow by about $400,000 in FY26, and about $300,000, not quite in FY27. So this assumes that we're losing roughly 3 to 4% of our enrollment each year, which is 10 to 15 kids. It factors in the state aid increases of 2% each year in 25 through 27. It could be more than that, but the state did in the last legislative session guarantee that we'll get at least a 2% increase on our formula allowance. So that's the state aid that we generate for each student we serve. I don't know if you just want to get an idea of the detail. We did this by account code, starting with our FY24 budget and projecting forward. We know what our FY24 and our FY25 levy will be. Just to give you an idea, a lot of our property taxes are driven by our enrollment, so they've been reduced by about 4%, which equates to our student enrollment loss projected for 26 and 27. The other big numbers are like our student aid, or our formula aid, that's this line. And so we have it growing by 2%, less about $100,000 for our students that we're losing each year. Special ed, the cross-subsidy aid, is a new revenue item in FY24, and that goes from 40% of the unfunded amount up to 50%, I believe, in FY25. So we're bumping that up a bit. Otherwise, just holding revenues pretty flat is typically the scenario. And then we have increases across the board, tweaking some things for like buildings and grounds equipment, cutting back on the spending on some of those types of items as we can, and so forth. So basically that gets us to our projection here, which is really where we want to be going. Up in this million to 1.3 million range is where we want to be just to see like what is that from a fund balance percentage standpoint. There you go. Equals 20. Yeah, so in that 10% range. questions on that? Anything I missed, Jeff or Sheena? This does assume too that we would shift our dollars that the district set aside years ago for separation and severance. We would uncommit that and move that into unassigned in FY24. So that would take board action, but what's happened is those dollars haven't been it hasn't been taken out of that fund balance over the years as we've paid out severance. Essentially, it's come out of here. So I think it just makes sense, and we've talked about this, just to shift it up to unassigned and help us stay out of the SOD in FY24. Mm-hmm.
To ask questions now, or what? Or is there more to this?
That's it.
Okay.
Yeah, so if anybody has any questions, comments?
Todd, Tim Lyon, board member. Is the assumption about declining enrollment an average of what's come over the last decade, or is that something that applies because of what our census operations are looking at here? Is that, maybe I can ask that to Jeff too.
I looked at the last couple of years in terms of what we've been losing, and it's been in that 10 to 15 range. So that's what I went with. I did not look at census data for enrollment for this projection. We can easily adjust that if we want to use a different number.
Okay, and you were also, as long as I got the floor, you were also doing calculations there to give me a percentage on the fund balance. I'm just doing the math in my head, but you talked about FY27, we're looking at about a 13%. Is that what I saw in the numbers?
I forgot I had columns in here. That's why my math wasn't working great.
That's fine. I just looking at round numbers there, but so FY27, hopefully we're up to about 13% again, which I think is where we're sort of motivated to get to. We're talking 15% here in the next 4 to 5 years.
Yeah, it's actually 20%, 16% in 26, and 25 we'd be at 1%.
Okay, thank you.
Yep.
So this includes with this all the budget cuts, all the shifts from some of our reserve funds that we did this current fiscal year.
Yeah, so what we are looking at doing, if I heard the question right, we are utilizing some of our operating capital dollars towards our tech position, I believe. Is that right, Sheena? And then we're also using some of our LTFM dollars. Some of those can go towards our buildings and grounds director, or whoever's helping plan and manage any facility improvements or repairs and maintenance, identifying our LTFM needs. So 50,000 out of capital and 25,000 out of LTFM. You can see we're able to sustain our capital at about 26,000 in LTFM. It's kind of a gradual decline, but still a decent balance at 200,000. If it helps, but operating capital is used for things like technology. It can go towards technology staff as well, textbooks, furniture and equipment, things like that. LTFM is kind of earmarked for facility renovations, improvements, maintaining the buildings.
I guess what typically goes in the unassigned?
So unassigned that's basically all our teachers, instructional supplies, kind of all other operating costs that aren't, that we can't specifically code here. Basically, these types of revenue streams come with strings attached, so they're restricted in terms of how we can use them. And the unassigned is all like the formula revenue, the 7138 per student, that's all unassigned. We can use how we want. Federal grants are unassigned. All our local revenues are unassigned. So that's what funds all of our staff, the majority of our staff, and other operations, electricity, transportation, special ed.
I also assume these numbers aren't taken into account, like we need, all the windows in the school need to be replaced, and a number of other maintenance type issues. Was that taken into account or no?
No, it was not.
Okay.
That sounds like a pretty big project. That's probably something that need to be bonded for, probably outside of the general operations. The LTFM money can handle some of that, but not all of that.
Okay. Do you have any questions?
What about the committed for separation? Eventually, will we have to put funds back in there?
Eventually, would we have to put funds back into the committed for separation, or are we just eliminating that?
We would just eliminate that. There's no requirement to set funds aside for that. It would just come out of unassigned in the future, as it has in the past. Even though we've had the dollars sitting here, they've actually come out of unassigned.
Excuse me, so that would be included in the budget. It would have to be a budget line item.
You said that would have to be a budget line item?
That's correct, yeah.
I thought there was a state demand of some sort that we had to set aside for separation. Is that not the case?
No, that's not true.
Okay.
No. When you have a healthy fund balance and you're looking at healthy, meaning unassigned is in good shape and you're at your fund balance goal, that would be a time to set aside for things that you're going to have in the future. So that was likely the attempt 10 years ago or whenever that was done. I only went back 5 or 6 years and it just has remained unchanged over that period. So I think that was the idea. And when that was established, it was taken out of unassigned and moved here. Or simply moving it back.
Any other questions?
So I don't know if you can answer it tonight, but I think what we're looking at as we move forward is the possibility of either an operating levy or a capital projects levy, specifically to cover our technology expenses and that type of thing. Looking at the numbers here, at some point we need to come up with if we do go to the voters, what would be an appropriate amount to ask for. I think the scenarios that we ran were 300,000 and 400,000, thinking that's kind of what our IT expenses are, which we've kind of frozen for this year. So I don't know if you have an opinion. I know you and I didn't get a chance to talk today on any of this, so I'm just kind of springing that on, and if you're not comfortable answering it, that would be something for a later meeting, is kind of coming up with all the cuts that we're doing to get through next year. What do we want to do in the future so we can have computers and technology for kids and that type of thing, so.
Jeff, are you directing that question at me?
Yep.
So one of the things, I mean, it's hard to get to the detail in here a little bit. Let me see what I can do. So you can see the spending on some of these tech items in this assumption to get to achieve the fund balance we're trying to get to. We are cutting like buildings and grounds equipment, cutting technology spending in half. So there are, and then we're also using operating capital to fund our tech position. So by getting a capital projects levy, that would allow those funds to go to cover those things and do all the things from a technology standpoint in the classroom that you would like to do, and not take it out of operating capital, so it'd free up capital dollars to buy textbooks and instructional software and those types of things. And I believe we also made reductions to other types of online instructional software and so forth, so those types of things would be covered by a capital projects levy. So yeah, there's reductions in here to just general supplies as well, instructional supplies and general supplies. Given our enrollment is declining, the thought is we would hold those budgets steady. These are things we can set and try to adhere to. But any type of funding that would free up dollars from that's being spent out of the unassigned, now instead of spending those out of unassigned, those could go towards instructional materials and those types of things. So even though you're not allowed to use capital projects levy for that type of thing, it would free up dollars so that we could have funds to do that.
Fiscal year 23 expenses and revenue, those are actual numbers, not the budgets, right?
So I started with the FY24 revised budget here. I did bring in FY23 final into this scenario.
Okay. Where's the?
Oh, FY23 here.
Yeah.
Yeah, these are the actual FY23 ending fund balances.
Okay. A small group, run up to the audience. Anybody want? Here's the guy who knows everything. So, anyone got any questions? Who's he for with? Jeff.
This is Todd Netsky from SMS.
Did they do the budgets in the past?
This is who we contract with. Yeah. And Sheena is our business manager.
And were our budgets off last year?
Well, this is our, second year with SMS or third?
I was going to say 2.5.
2.5 years,
That's the
yeah.
number I throw out there.
Is there greater confidence in the budget numbers this year, next year?
I'll let Todd answer that. Todd, are there better confidence after all this going through that the budget numbers for this year and next year are high confidence numbers?
Yes. We've gone through every budget code in detail, line item by line item. So, as long as we monitor those budgets and say no when we're at the budget, and we live within those budgets, these will be, there's some big assumptions involved, but they should be on the mark, in the ballpark.
Quick question, is there anything going to be set aside for contingency?
Will anything be set aside for contingency in this budget? Or the going forward, your projections here?
So there's no contingency like line item, if you will, built into the budget. Sometimes business managers do, stick aside $100,000 contingency or something like that. Given how tight our budget is, instead we just, again, budgeted in great detail by line item. And, our contingency is our fund balance here, essentially. So, we need to monitor the budget, make sure we're living within the budget, monitor our revenue, our enrollment, and make adjustments to our spending if our decline is greater than what we're anticipating. So, we have assumptions for negotiations and settlements as well in the future. So, if we can't stay within those assumptions, then, we'll have to make cuts elsewhere again as well.
That answer your question, Woody?
It does, but our contingency right now is our line of credit. Once June 30th, we're gonna lose that. We won't have it anymore. Then what's gonna happen? Say we have a problem with the boiler, say we have to do something that's gonna cost $200,000.
So that's something that I'll be working with Matt Ellers, and Todd, you can chime in too. Aid anticipation borrowing,
You're gonna have to say that again.
aid anticipation borrowing is a tool that schools
Todd, did you
use.
get
I
that question?
wasn't aware of that.
I did not, no.
He was asking about if there was a problem with the boilers or a large expense came up unexpectedly and our line of credit is expiring here shortly. What would then be the contingency? I believe Jeff kind of gave him an answer for it, but that was what the question was. If you want to expound on it, feel free.
So schools do have a cash flow remedy mechanism available to them, the aid anticipation borrowing certificates, and that allows us to borrow money at a pretty low rate of return, or in terms of interest. There's a cost for the legal and the financial advisor for issuing those on our behalf, but and the payback on that is always scheduled ahead of when you potentially would want to, or actually after when you could re-borrow. So if you were in a crunch to pay back what you had borrowed, you're borrowing the second year prior to having to pay that back. So basically it allows you to get back on your feet and make sure you're able to make payroll and pay your bills while you're rebuilding that fund balance.
Answer your question? Okay, he's satisfied with that. All right. Anyone else? Okay, no more questions. Thank you very much, Todd.
Yep, thank you. Have a good night.
Sheena, are you gonna stay in on the meeting, or?
If you need me to, it's up to you.
I don't think so. We don't have any more
I don't think we're gonna be
budget-specific
getting into the
questions.
budget right now, so we'll let you go.
Okay.
All right, thank you.
Thanks.
Is that SMS or whatever it's called, just an advisory company for us?
No, they're a contractor.
Contract.
And that's we used to have a business manager position, but then she left and joined this company, and then we had the option of trying to find another business manager or go with these guys, and we opted to try and see how things go with these guys.
SMS does have a history with the school. when I first came on the board, they had Emily Turner Parsley in the position as business office manager, and she was also an SMS employee.
Settled here.
Jeff, I assume you would rely on them heavily for financial advice, right?
Oh, yeah. The day-to-day accounting piece of it, yep.
Did you ever check and see if they have any
Yes,
E&O insurance?
it's not for schools, that's not what it's called.
These guys have it.
Yes, and we have it, it's faithful performance of duty is what we're looking at right now. It won't recoup all of the dollars lost for some of the things that happened, but we can possibly get some of it back. So it's a drawn out process working with insurance.
That'd be going after SMS's.
Well, it's, our insurance would go after their insurance, you know how that works, so, yeah, so.
They were part of the issue too, right? I mean,
Well, they were managing the personnel, yeah.
I mean, it's kind of their care, right, in a lot of ways. Some of them,
Yeah, it's under their purview,
I gotta believe they have insurance.
yes, yes.
The contract that we draw up with them, and I don't have it available in my computer unless I look really hard, but they offer up sort of a percentage deal where they're saying, okay, we will assume 80% or something of the responsibilities for daily budgeting. And is that right, Jeff? If I'm misrepresenting that, but so they've assumed, and I think it was, it's the lion's share of the responsibility. So yes, they're doing 80% of our budgeting work, which is what he's doing right there.
So we're actively pursuing recovering some of those funds from errors.
Yes.
Yes.
Are we contractually obligated to them, and that's why we're still doing business with them?
It's a difficult, and I did call MSBA about that, say how many, but they said it's a very limited, it's specific to the state of Minnesota. And there's one other company, I think that you guys did a search, or Sheena did a search looking for that. There was one other company, and in that effort, we were told that they were not taking new customers. It's a lot like the audit companies. You go out for bids and you get one bid back, that kind of thing. So there's a little bit of hands tied on that. And he's done quite a bit to try to correct some of the stuff that went wrong last time, in terms of his budget calculations. And again, you can hear it in his voice when he's on there. I think he's much more comfortable with this because he has done a very scrutinized effort on our budget specifically because it did not go well the last time around. So he's taking a little bit of that blame. I mean, he did that in a public meeting here. Financially, I think he's also accepted some of that blame because he reduced the rate of our contract, this coming year. So there's an acknowledgement there that they did something wrong, yes. And I think that's the question, but I think they're working also hard to correct that stuff. And the alternatives, like you heard Lynn talking about, it's not like you go hire somebody in the newspaper, say, oh, we got somebody in the community. School finance is a really difficult creature, and you know that. You've had your nose in like the forestry stuff and things like that. It's a little bit different than just having an accountant come in and run your books for you.
And our new manager has done a very good job. She's very detailed, very documented.
She's
Answer your question? The first one, or is that review of the services and fees with, is it Nellers?
Well, I didn't anticipate the budget report. I was happy that it came in sooner than expected, so that's why it wasn't on the discussion items. I'm not calling it agenda because it's more of a discussion thing.
Yep.
And what I thought And we're not going to have all the answers tonight, but trying to work through the process that the board wants to use to determine, A, do we want to go to the voters and ask for dollars to work on some of our facility needs that are
Jeff, could you
above and
speak
beyond?
more into your mic? Sorry. We have people in the
I'm
back.
sorry, Gloria, I apologize. I'll stand up here and I'll
There you
face
go.
you. How does that sound?
We'll
So-
double mic it.
Yeah, don't do that. So what was I saying?
Next steps.
Next steps. What do you want to do with,
As far as some of the facility needs, is that, can you hear me now? Okay.
Oh, yeah, it was
But-
going to the public for referendum.
Yeah, so deciding what, like with the facility assessment that WIDSEF did, there's about $7 million worth of projects. I don't think all of them have to be included on a referendum. Some of those can be part of our LTFM dollars that comes in, but the LTFM dollars is not going to cover all of our needs. So we have to determine how long do we want to have, and Woody can attest to the windows, the condition of some of the windows over almost 30 years of, wear and tear. How do we want to replace that?
Right now, we've got about half the windows in working condition.
No. And we have how many, 800 and how many windows do we have?
I think it was 134 operators
Okay,
and a bunch of stationaries.
it's quite a few. So you piecemeal that, do you fix it a few at a time? There's added cost when you do it that way, or is it better to,
Actually, when I surveyed the windows, I wrote up
Yep.
the windows in the kindergarten rooms being dangerous.
no,
And the board acted on it to replace them. And we do have some other windows that are getting towards that point too.
Mhm.
And that's one way to do it, is piecemeal by piecemeal.
Yep.
The other way is you might get a less expensive deal by going with a window provider or window factory, and just having them do it.
no. So another need that we're looking at is the driveway, the bus lane. If you walk in, you can see the conditions of the sidewalks, and we've been patching and repairing as time goes. That might be something that we want to, we're eventually going to have to do something with. Also with the drop-off on the north side, having sidewalks and curbing there would be more safer for the kids going out to the vehicles. So those are just some of the examples that are in that assessment, and at some point we have to look through and say, are there some needs in here that we need to go to the voters to ask for dollars to pay for it, or are we going to spread it out over years?
One other big one I'll get on record is the brickwork. There's problems with the brickwork.
Duck
So,
pointing, yep.
in my mind, the windows and the brickwork, you can kick them down the road, but you're gonna end up paying maybe even more if you keep doing that.
So that's one piece of it. We've also talked about, and Todd referenced the capital projects levy. And that's to bring back some of the technology so we can continue to offer that. We can also use it for replacing our buses. We've frozen replacing our buses. That's about $100,000 a bus. And I think John reported on some of the mileage. And, Dale, you can attest we can hold out till 2027. But that,
You got a few younger buses that don't have much on them, but eventually time catches up to all.
so that's another thing that we need to start looking at, because you can only not replace a bus for so long, and then you start having problems that are going to cost you more. So that's another thing that capital projects levy can be used for, is for vehicle and bus purchases. And then the other one is the operating levy, and those are dollars that go right into the general fund. And as the board saw with Matt's presentation and the dollars, the operating levy is a lot more impactful on the local tax burden because of it eliminates some of the rec properties. But those are funds that go into the general fund. You can use them for anything. Example, we're looking at counseling's come up a few times, and that's one of our cuts that we have to make. And there's different counseling, doesn't have to be a social worker, but that could be come back with an operating levy if you want to replace some of the positions. We're reducing some paras in school readiness and looking at ways that we can serve all the kids, but it will be different than what we've done in the past. So that would be something else that those dollars could go towards. And those are just a few examples. So I guess tonight was just intended to start the discussion on how do we want to attack this, because we're talking about three big things here. And that was kind of the outline that I put there. So this is just a suggestion for discussion. I did send out an article, and I didn't bring my notes, that Corinne had sent. It's in an email that talked about having a unified vision with the board and an administration that you share with the public. And we haven't sat down as a group and went through the facility assessment and weighed in on what do we think is priority, what do we want to present to the public. So I think that's kind of what we need to decide how we want to address that. I have the last meeting I sent out information on some of those deadlines. If we want to do any type of referendum, by the May school board meeting is when we need to decide what referendums we're going to ask, and so that they can do the process to getting things in for review and comment and that type of thing.
You have a list of that report on the building that people can look at that kind of shows the WITSEF's report?
It should
On
be
the
online.
It's on the website.
Under public notices, I believe.
That's kind of what they're looking at.
I believe the whole assessment is out there.
Because it should be in the working session packet too, right?
It's on the website.
Yeah.
If you go to the school board section, go to board meetings, it's every board meeting minutes, and, well, you can probably explain better.
So all of our board meeting packets that the board actually gets before the meeting are on the website. We're now putting the work session packets on there, and also under public notices, we put the WITSEF report.
Looking at each other for who's going to ask the first question or something.
You want to talk specifically about what Ellers is offering to do for us at the cost of about $2,900?
I grabbed the wrong product.
Okay.
For $2,800?
He's going to get he grabbed the wrong stack of papers to bring to the meeting, so.
Well,
So he wants to know if we want to have big group sessions to work on everything, or break into like two, and one works on operating and one works on capital. Or should we do it all together?
I'd say let's do it all together if we can.
and dividing it up over the...
Like into committees, kind of.
Yeah, I agree. I think that then you got to come back and have the discussion again. You might as well have it right there
Together.
in the large room, so to speak, or the combined room.
And I think too, I guess the way I would go about it, like on there, get it all broken out, like his expanded one, when he went in to the expenditures and revenue. I would like to see, have him put just the real numbers from those same items from fiscal year '23. And then we should be able to have a pretty good projection going forward, and we should be able to do the math fairly easily to figure out what size of referendums we need for each item, I would think.
And I would think too, to look at a long-range financial plan with, if each of these referendums were passed.
Yep.
What the cost would be in interest and that sort of thing versus, you know, the additional revenue that we would get per student or, you know.
Yep.
And particularly if you would get into the large referendum for the building improvements, you know, that's gonna increase our revenue, but it's also gonna increase our expense significantly to make those debt payments, interest and debt.
While you were gone, Jeff, we kind of decided that rather than break up into committees, we figured, well, may as well just tackle them all as a group. That way we don't have to reinvent the wheel.
Just as long as everyone doesn't expect, if you come here, it's open to the public, but this is more of a discussion thing, so it's not presented in a way that's, we have all our numbers in it. This is just an open discussion for the board to have the conversation. So it's not meant to be a formal board meeting with specific data and information. It's more of a just opportunity. That's what a working session is for you guys to talk about, ask questions. If you need me to look up information, it's very informal. When we put the mic up and start talking into things and getting questions, you know, that expectation might change a little bit, you know, but I just want to clarify so that this is not going to be a polished presentation like what it would be at a school board meeting. It's more of a ongoing discussion, and we don't have to go by discussion items I have here. That was just the starting point, and so.
Do we specifically, I mean, we start talking about a capital projects levy or an operating referendum, keeping them separate. Is there a sentiment that the board has as to which direction we're going? I mean, somewhere in there, we've heard this 2 or 3 times now. Do you have, like Lynn, you're a pretty good financial person. Do you look at that and consider a building bond, something we haven't really even brought up? Is that just something we're not even?
I guess to me, you know, we've had a lot of discussion about steps, you know, and I think a building bond is going to be necessary in order for us to replace windows and concrete and those kinds of things. And I think we have to start somewhere. And I think that facility assessment and reviewing that Woodseth did is a good place to start. I think the operating referendum is probably, you know, getting close to a necessity, but you know, we don't know if it's going to pass, even if we do take it to the voters. And so we need to have a financial plan like Todd and Sheena worked on to do with or without that. You know, so that, I think that long-range financial plan was really important to see that and to see where we could get without it. But I also think there's a risk of that, because I think that if our enrollment continues to drop, we could have, you know, either cutting a program, increasing class sizes. There's some real risks to the education system. And I think that, you know, it looks like to me that the smaller class sizes are more desirable for the teachers and probably for the students as well as the parents. And so I think that we need to look at what might happen, you know, if we run into a jam, you know, and Jeff had mentioned some of the things that an operating levy might include, you know, additional paras where we need them, the class size, like I talked about, counseling, those kinds of things that the community thinks is important, that the staff within the school think are important. I think we need to respond to those.
So are you saying do them separately or do them together?
I think we should do them all together.
You say all 3.
Mm-hmm.
And throw everything at the wall and see what passes kind of thing? I mean, I'd be really surprised if this community would pass all 3 of those.
And I would be too, but I think that if we get the information out for all 3 of them, I think that people can pick and choose what they would pass. Now, that's just my opinion, so.
But if you're saying pick and choose, then it sounds like you want three.
Questions.
Three questions.
Yeah,
Okay.
3
Like what-
questions.
So you want 3 questions?
Yeah, 3 questions. Yeah,
Because
excuse me.
initially we were.
I didn't make
I was
that,
hearing
I
you
didn't
were
make
having all
that
3
clear.
combined.
No,
Okay.
no, there would be 3 questions, but we would take them all to the voters at the same time.
Actually, I think we're all in agreement. That's the way, the method I was leaning towards. How about the other
Yes.
2 who were here?
I wasn't leaning that way, actually. I was looking at the capital projects levy, just saying, okay, we put all our eggs in a basket, work really hard at it. You know, I'm thinking,
And just put one up?
well, that was my thought is, just for the sake of the sanity of the voting population, asking them to digest all 3, differentiate, and then vote, it almost seems like it's random on their voting prospect again. I mean, it's taken us a while to get our arms around, okay, what can I do with a,
And I'm not opposed to that either, but, you know, to me, it's kind of like a feel for what you get for what people think in the community, I think, are more important. Is it a 30-year-old building, preserving that, or is it
small class sizes?
small class sizes or counseling or those kinds of things? And that's, you know, I mean, you think of like computer replacement, you know, we put all that stuff on hold and, you know, eventually those computers just outdate, you know, so there's lots of things that are to be considered, but what do we think as a community is most important?
Well, if you present it to the community that way,
Right,
I mean,
yeah.
that's a little difficult, it's a
Yeah.
little more long-winded.
And it is, it's very, you know, it's very complex to make sure that everyone understands what each one is for, you know.
And they all are kind of tied together, like if you have to take operating capital to fund the changing of the windows in every general fund, to fund the windows, then it's gonna have to get cut from somewhere else, and that's a chunk that has to.
Exactly, that, you know, yeah. I mean, basically, if an operating, or the building bond does not pass, the windows as they fall apart are gonna have to be replaced out of operations. You know, so it's kind of a domino effect to your operations.
But if you pass the capital projects levy, for instance, or a building
Right.
bond, for instance, then assuming the Mike Reed question, that those numbers are progressing the way they should, you know, this is an accurate budget.
Yeah.
We have that money to keep our class sizes small, and so you've got that, you're not dipping into that fund all the time. I mean,
Yeah.
I think that's, I hope that's what the voters are looking at, is a responsibility that we're throwing out there and saying, okay, this is what we're going to do. There's tangible responsibility for this money, which is, you know, we're not just throwing it in your lap again. You know,
Yeah.
we're saying, here it is, we need a new chiller, or we need a new
Roof.
roof, you know, things like that come up, or that are in those that would set.
Well, you know, I mean, the ones that have been mentioned are windows, buses, you know, the brickwork, the drives and the sidewalks, and Carla mentioned the roof is another item, buses, you know, so there's a lot of things that could go under that,
Right, the ongoing
Building.
technology costs.
you know, under that building.
The track fall under buildings, I assume?
Yeah,
Yeah, the track would be under the bond.
yeah.
I don't know if
But
people haven't
buses can
heard,
be too,
or
right?
track has
No.
issues.
They would be only under the
And,
capital.
portions of it, there was drain tile, I think it was when they raised the football field, well, that kind of created other problems. So the drain tile areas are sinking, and we cannot host a meet because it's a safety hazard, is what they're saying. And I think what you may remember, I think there's 2 specific lines that I can think of.
The outer two.
Tip over 2 lanes.
Yeah. Well, it's because of 2 spots, it's not the entire lane, it's 2 spots on those outer lanes. And they're kind of the beginnings of a third. We actually, I helped, what's that class?
Asperger?
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah, they helped me, what's the class name?
The shop class?
The what?
The shop class? class? Katie's
No, it
class?
wasn't the shop class. It was a technology
It
class.
was GT.
I brought them
Oh,
out.
GT.
Yeah, I brought them out with the county's GPS surveying, and they actually helped me go out and survey the track so that we could submit this data to a consultant. And yeah, so that's a very large expense.
So with the technology, what all includes, is that like the person that is in charge of technology or just like computer replacement?
I'll look at Jeff on
It
that
would
one.
pay his wage.
I'm sorry.
Does the technology one, does that fund Billy?
Yes, anything associated with technology, like our student data system, Synergy. The teachers in the high school use Schoology,
And why is
even
that?
curriculum.
Why do we have two separate, because my daughter has Schoology and then she
Yeah.
has.
That's a principal question. There's tools and things that the teachers like for communicating with the Schoology, but that's something you'd have to ask Mary. But that would be something that the capital projects levy would cover. So much of our curriculum now doesn't just come in a textbook. It's online technology type stuff. It's very hard nowadays to teach without technology in
Right.
education,
No,
you know, so,
I understand
yeah.
that part 110%.
But you wanna know why
I
we
just
don't have
know why
a
we
uniform.
two different forms.
Yeah, yeah.
Because my daughter has, well, I turned it on this one, but now the teacher has to take and go to this one to make it go to this one to get onto the.
And that's just.
A lot of it goes back to COVID, because we used to have computer labs, where you'd have 30 computers in a one room and they'd sign up to go use it. Now we have one-to-one basically in the building for all the kids. So that's an example of COVID dollars coming in. This is what you need to do. You spend it, now you have all this technology. And we had one technology person that couldn't keep up, so we had to hire an IT person to help support that, because a computer, anyone that's been on a computer and doesn't work, very frustrating. So that's kind of how things kind of transpired to now, where do we go back and have fewer devices for the kids, or do we continue to support that?
And Jeff, correct me on this, and I think one of the things that comes up with two softwares, I think one of them is the kids are using it to submit, and I don't know how the teachers do it. I think the other one could be the teachers are using that for the record, for the grading, and I can't tell you why the two don't meet.
Yeah.
Synergy takes care of all the attendance, lunch count, report cards, and there's other things, but it's mostly just the record-keeping type piece of it, where the Schoology is actually teachers posting curriculum or lessons, and kids can pull it off and work on it if they're at home or whatever. So that's kind of the difference.
So they're different programs, but they're intertwined.
Right, right.
And I really don't think there's a program that is a do-all.
Not that
Out there.
anyone's found. There might be,
Yeah,
but.
I mean,
we haven't
you know,
found
it's just weird, it's just like, why do you, I always ask, what are you doing? I have to do it this way, and then the teacher takes me this way, I'm like, what? Like, you lost me a long time ago.
Yeah.
But, so then with them having their separate little computers, because I've heard from my daughter that some kids aren't so good to them, they do come back damaged. Can we not start charging for that to help with our costs?
And that's another thing we're looking at, is having more fees for kids to have access to technology. We also allow kids and parents, if they want to bring their own device, they can do that as well, so, yeah.
So, I mean, it's just something else that, you know, there's a lot of abuse,
Yeah,
can we charge them? And then I just have another question, as Lynn said, sizes of classes that you think are okay. What size classes do you think would be okay? And what size don't you want to get to?
what age are you talking?
Yeah.
Oh, high school, I guess.
High school?
Oh, I was.
Depends
more
on the
referring to
class and depends on the kids.
Elementary, yeah.
30, 35 is not out of the question.
Even elementary, I mean, in other locations,
Yeah.
Yeah.
going 30 kids in elementary.
Right.
I think most of us here, if you were up somewhere else, I mean, I guarantee I had 20, 30 kids in all through elementary. And I can say, because I looked into this a little bit, there's been studies done, and if you can have the number 17 or less, there's a benefit. If you're at 19 or 20, you may as well go all the way to 30 because there's no benefit to it. So, and in previous, all this time, we've been really trying to have that 17 or less number, which is kind of the Cadillac plan. And so,
Most of our elementary classes are in the 20s.
Yeah, I would say that 17 to 25 would
Yeah.
be
But
again, it's-
25 usually maximum.
25. Yeah,
Yeah.
I don't like to see classes more than 20.
well, the problem is if you try and split a class with
Yeah.
20, now you're down to 10 kids in each class, and that's
Right,
not
yeah.
entirely.
And I think some studies will show that too small classes aren't always beneficial.
Yeah.
But
So, and that's my question there too, is like in the high school, like say that there's a math class that the teacher is teaching only 2 kids.
I don't know if we have that. I'm
You
not
don't
sure.
have that.
With only
My
2
daughter
kids.
is one of those that has only 2 kids in class.
Is it an elective or a higher level math class, I would assume?
I couldn't tell you that.
Okay. That's where, at least from what I've seen, that's where they tend to be, is where they're not your general class, they're an elective or a higher level or something to that effect.
That would be a Mary Merchant. I don't know the exact in and outs of every class. And so,
Yeah, I guess I don't know if it's a higher class or not. But when she says that, you know, they're done in 20 minutes because there's only 2 of them,
no.
to say, why is there only 2 kids in this class? Like, but now that you say that, I wonder if it's not higher.
It could very well could be.
That answers my questions, thank you.
I have one more observation about this process here, referendum process. I spend a lot of time explaining to people, about the difference in the operating levy and the capital projects levy. And that's something that we probably should consider. You know,
Yeah.
making sure that the public knows and understands, the ramifications of either one. That's a big thing. I was over at the Williams Senior Center for lunch this week, and I could have held a seminar on this with 30 people there.
They were interested in that
You
information.
betcha.
Okay, good.
You're darn right. You know, some of them are farmers, some of them are just having residences. They all want to know, what's this going to cost us? What's going to be the difference in the operating levy and the capital project levy?
I suppose, what do they get for their money?
Got it.
Yeah.
Yep.
That was my question, is which one of these is gonna cost the taxpayer the least? Is the bond gonna be the cheapest way to go to handle this?
We had that last meeting we had, he had the numbers based on the bond that we were trying to get each year. And I don't remember them off the top of my head, but I know that one of them was on oh, perfect. Yeah, that's the,
But they were picking like $150,000 house for a round number.
and I think they multiply, touch me. There's not a straight line. So For the capital capital project levy, there we go. You're trying to raise $400,000 a year. And that would come out to, on a $200,000 house, that'd be $87. Their operating referendum, it would increase our number up to $745 per kid. That's the level we would be at. That corresponds to $300,000, and that would increase a $200,000 house $161. That's the one where it's only homestead and commercial or taxed. What's called?
The other one's recreational properties and ag properties that get included in the.
And seasonal recreational are not included. The third one, the building bond, we'd be looking at trying to raise $7 million, and that $200,000 house, that would cost $80. So, and if you did all three of them, you would raise a $200,000 house to $328.
And the reason the values are different, Glorianne, and this chart is available on, I think online still, isn't it? Because you said the board packets were out there. So these charts are available, but the difference being that there are different people, different groups being assessed those taxes. For instance, on the capital projects levy, which is the one I was sort of hawking here a minute ago, said I'd like the capital projects levy, and my thought is because everybody pays it, it's not just the homeowners or the homestead credit people, but also seasonal rec people. You know, the guy who bought 80 acres of deer hunting land and put a fish house on it, he's still, you know, going to be responsible for some of that. It's not totally burdened by the local tax base. So there are differences there. And then the ag land also gets taxed. But like Mike points out, you know, in terms of, you know, I look at it from that perspective as a homeowner. I want everybody's property to support the school because, well, if you hold that 80 acres sort of in reserve, you're not contributing, you know, to the student population, you're not contributing to the jobs base, you know, and the least you could do possibly is contribute to the tax burden, you know, of the school. So that's why I look at it. But Mike Reed comes in the last and says, hey, you know how hard it is to sell a house to a guy coming out of Edina, because the first thing he looks at, for instance, is, you know, the tax base, or one of the first things. So, you know, it inflates that sale potential or deflates that sale potential. So it's not like they're all comparatively the same in terms of what you're asking for. It's who's paying for it as well, if that makes sense. And that's where Woody, I think you probably got into your conversation, because the Williams crowd, for instance, would have a lot of ag land, you know, represented there.
So then commercial would be the same?
They're their own category too.
Yeah, they would be.
Commercial, I think commercial is everything.
Commercial's involved in, just like you would be as a homeowner, you're involved in everything.
So we would pay $328 on, like, and every $200,000, right?
Roughly. On a
The
$200,000 house,
If all three.
you pay, if we
If all
pass
three
all three of those, which is quite a, I mean, I again look at myself as a taxpayer again, and I don't think I could find it in my heart to pay all three.
But those are using the highest numbers, haven't they, when they estimated those?
Those are using what?
The highest that we would ask for.
That's based on $7 million.
Yeah,
Right, oh,
that's-
yeah, but,
So those are just estimates, based on the highest of.
Yes,
we
that-
could.
If it's a bond, they use net tax capacity. That's over everyone. Yep.
Approximately. It didn't look like it was linear, so I'm not sure.
No, it's
That would be like
Tax rates.
$1,500 more a year for us to pay taxes, for us.
for your house and your business.
Right.
No, you'd have to look at the different line for the business.
Yeah, there'd be a different valuation, you mean, yeah.
The valuation on the business is not the same as the house.
Yeah.
Is it less or more?
Commercial is taxed higher.
Commercial's taxed
Generally
higher than
taxed higher.
home.
So it would be a lot more than, you
Yeah.
know? Like, so then I'm just gonna be honest, I wouldn't vote for it then.
Well, in
If it was
that-
all three, I wouldn't vote for it because I don't wanna pay,
But it's not an all or nothing. You can vote for one
right,
if
Yeah.
you wanted. You don't have to
Right.
vote for all three.
right, but I mean, I'm just saying if I were to
Right.
do it, I wouldn't vote for all three. You know, so if you put it all together, I'm just saying, if you put it all together, I think you would get less votes
3 different questions.
compared to 3 different.
No, I get it.
That
Nobody
they all
likes
have.
paying more taxes, but
Is
Right,
a level.
but I
It's
get it,
frightening.
you,
Yes.
I mean, I understand
Probably
that
would
we're in
deter
need of some money,
Yeah.
From
but
voting.
And I
Is there a way
didn't think
that
of it like that. I thought of
for
more
the
that.
building, is there
be
grants
giving
out
them
there
choice.
that we can get?
we're very good at looking for grants and money. And
You know
so
what I mean?
And I can
We've
see
gone
it.
after
Yeah.
every grant.
Yeah.
But I wouldn't get too
Yeah.
worked up
I get it.
because we really do have to wait to figure out what the deficit numbers are or
Yeah. To
and to
save,
see what we're actually going to ask
It could
for
be half
because
that
those
number.
numbers are
Right, right.
high.
Yeah, but no, I'm just.
You know what I mean?
I'm
So I
just
really
saying
don't want
going
to
by-
deter you by looking at those numbers.
Right, but I'm just saying for what the numbers I'm looking at right now, if we put it all together from that standpoint, me as a business owner and a homeowner that has 40 acres and our tax base is higher than $200,000 on just our house, let alone having 5 different properties for a business, it's very costly for,
And I think that was Lynn's suggestion, don't let me put words in your mouth,
Right.
but
no.
let's present all
exactly.
three, not the lump. But
Right.
there are 3 separate line item questions on that ballot, and you say, because now you've had Woody, you bought him lunch and said, Woody, go to the Williams Senior Center and disseminate the proper information. Those people come in and say, just like you did, this applies to me. I understand that we're really low on what we're trying to give out to our school at $24 per pupil unit, when, for instance, Lancaster has a $1,300 per pupil unit comparison, and a very similar, and I understand they have some wealthy, farmers over there, and they probably can afford that better than we can, but at the same time, do you present all 3? And then my argument was, not really an argument, do you present just one and try to do it really well and present it properly? But I don't want to make the decision for you. And that's what Lynn, she's sort of, I think, on your side on that. Let you make what decision you want about what taxes to support.
Well, and Corinne just mentioned, she could speak for herself, but she just mentioned, the fear of people thinking that maybe all 3 would pass.
Right.
So,
I've heard
maybe,
that.
yeah. I mean,
And
I never even thought of that.
And I think it's a legitimate concern, and I think it could be a deterrent from voting.
You mean to vote for any of them?
Correct.
I think we have an obligation to get feedback and determine what do we need and just ask for what we need. And if we can pick through the building projects and identify those that we need to fix sooner than later and not have windows replaced over the next 8 years to get it done. If that's what people would say they would support, then that's what we ask for. I can't think of what else is in there. There might be some things in there that, I think there's a bathroom in there over by the football field or something with that. That's something that there's been an ad, people have brought that up 1,000 times, and that is something that I would not recommend that we add showers and bathrooms over in the football field. So I think that's the process that we need to go through. And I think to get through this, if we're going to do it in this fashion, I think we need to schedule another meeting and
Just
focus
for
on
that.
one thing.
Yeah.
Well,
Get the information, identify what projects we want to move forward, and then do the next thing.
I
'Cause
don't know if you were going out when I said it, but the way I see doing it, like Todd had that very detailed expenditure and revenue thing. I'd like to see the actual dollars for our expenditures for fiscal year '23, and then we can gauge that based on his projection, and we should be able to come up with a pretty good idea of what we need to do work.
Well, it would also be stuff that, on that list, would need to be accomplished in the next 10 years and stuff that would be able to
Could
be
be delayed,
postponed.
yeah.
Because realistically, if we do this right, we should be going through this process again in a decade. right? I mean, we get those projects done, we get the next 10 years, and we go back and say, okay, thank you, now we need this.
Is the life of a bond 20 years or 10?
They had it as 18 here. on this,
18?
And the other stuff is 10, the operating levy.
Yeah, I just couldn't remember that.
Right.
How
Yep,
long was the operating levy?
18, not the operating,
10.
10.
Looks like about $2 million worth of windows, tuck point.
Yep.
Roof.
Yep.
So the real, to keep the box good,
Structural.
I think that's realistic. There's a lot of, brand new playground equipment and
Yeah.
$1.3 million to fix the track.
Yep.
There's some easy decisions in my book. We're $1 million.
Keep in mind, if you don't do the track, we won't have track. At least we can't host any meetings.
I get it, but
Buy on fuel.
it's
Yeah.
just, if you had to make our decisions, this is, looks like a couple $1 million there versus $7.5 million of like imminent, probably structural things. I don't think that's a hard sell. Keep the building functionally secure.
That's about half of what he projected.
So that was 400,000.
He was at 7 million
7 million
for the building.
for the,
Yeah, the 7 million is everything in there. That's,
that's everything that's in that
There's
plan.
not other things that are needed, but
Yeah.
it keeps the wind out of the rain out of the windows and stuff.
Yep.
Well, that's, the prioritizing needs to be done.
yeah, yeah.
That's good.
Well, should we start there with our next meeting?
I think that would be good because we're over an hour.
Yes.
So I
We'll
think,
just go over the building, the WISA, prioritize.
Yeah.
Okay. We'll do that.
Has the school exhausted every resource to try and find revenue for the Casper? I don't know the answer to this, but how many vacant acres is the school in the district?
We've got,
school forest, are you
School
talking about school
forest
forest?
thank you.
Three
Michael.
different locations.
We got a
It's
couple.
I-
quite a few. A little over 400. Is that locked up in something, or why is that? I've never heard it discussed of that being done.
Selling?
It's half a million.
The school actually gets money on some of
And then
it.
that's the next question, how much then? Is it worth
Not
it?
all of it. It's it would be the timber sales and part of that. I don't know how much it's,
There's an account, the
Yeah.
contract, that the money was supposed to be set aside to the school forest.
Yep.
Yeah,
Yeah.
it is.
We have like
Yes.
Yeah.
almost $32,000 in there right now.
Yeah, we got, for logging off the one over in Pitt, just recently we did, I think 27,000 on that.
But those dollars were
Set aside for.
set aside for education related to the school forest, and that goes back to the
Well,
Assigned
is it
funding.
locked up
Bruce
in
Hasbargen
the
days.
legality of where it can't be sold? When we're talking about 27,000 here, 32,000 here,
Yeah,
when we have a
we've talked
vanity that's a
about
lot larger than this, when it costs them.
that, and I thought there was something on not being
I
able to
mean,
sell
I
some of
don't
that
know the
land.
exact current price on
But-
selling land right now, but
Yeah.
I imagine somewhere under $1,000, $400 plus
But-
acres.
Yep.
That's,
keep in mind, once you sell it, it's gone.
Right.
Yeah, and I think we recognize that there's a benefit to our school forest here. I mean, I think as part of the whole sort of culture of our school, we do have a school forest that probably second to none in the state, quite honestly. I mean, whether it's in terms of size or in terms of, the way it's being applied, but we get good value out of that, I think, at the moment.
yeah, I'm not
Yes.
opposed to it. I'm not into.
There's
seeing
a
the
chunk
schools
of land
pass
up
that.
on 6,
But
west
I
of 6.
haven't seen it on board for an option.
Fair
during
enough.
this crisis.
Yep, no, that's
I
fair.
think
And
it
that
should be
is
something
not
that's
school
possible.
forest designation, and then there's some
When
land just south of town.
We
It's
went
The
another
through-
finances
40.
at home don't add up.
That's not school
Sometimes you
forest
gotta cut back.
designation.
We went through a triage of properties here about, Nick, 5-10 years ago in the school forest situation, but we looked at them, I think it was when Reed McFarland was still around, but sold off, they had a bunch, just like you're saying, little 1 acre, 2 acres here. My daughter's living in the Wabonica school, that was one of them, I think, that the school sold off. But just trying to clean up, just like you said, stuff that we weren't using anyway. What do we sell? Something right on the corner?
I think we just gave it away.
Or
That
on
was
the-
in
to
the
the
highway.
state.
For
That's-
$500 or
that's
something,
fine.
but anyway, we
State.
cleaned it up, trying to get, just what you're saying, might as well get some revenue out of it.
I'm just talking about stuff that's not even attached to the school. Obviously, I think it's beneficial to keep acreage that's surrounding school for, I mean, it's natural, whatever school want, but you have all the state commandments. You don't need a school. It's not bringing in.
I guess to answer your question, yes, we're aware of it, and we've considered it. I guess, in my opinion, we're not at a point where we should sell it off yet, but it's up for discussion.
And isn't it used, doesn't the teachers actually use that and go out there?
Yeah, the one right here, the
Right here, but also out there, I mean,
The other
I've
one down the
been a
School Forest
chaperone
Road.
that way.
Yeah, you planted trees out there and so, yeah, done that. That got logged off. That's the one we're talking about here just last year, year and a half ago. You know, so it's providing an educational experience for sure.
We also have, 900 million acres of state land here too, right? So you could get that same experience, no problem, but a few different places, I guess. So it's a legitimate point, if you got $500,000 or more
I think we need to look into
ground that's
legalities of selling
creating revenue,
it.
you probably better.
There's probably
Yeah,
something there.
there is a demand for a school forest. I think every school district has one in the state of Minnesota. It's
They
just,
were all developed like way back when, and the whole idea, and that's why they're scattered all over the place, is when you had a school in pretty much every township.
1636.
Yeah, it was meant to fund the school with timber sales is really what it was originally intended for.
The school was in the center of the township, the rest of the township funded the school.
Yeah.
Farming or whatever.
Yep.
Well, it's worth looking into
Yep.
what the process would be to sell school property and what the value is.
When you think about how many schools there used to be in the county, whenever that was established, there was a lot more schools.
All right, any other questions? Okay, then let's set another meeting
Schedule a
and
meeting
then
up.
wrap this one up.
You're gonna have a real hard education problem if you do all three of them. How are people gonna understand what the bond is for, what the operating, what the capital is? They're gonna get all confused.
Glad you asked that, because we've got a plan. We're gonna put either articles or under a letter to the editor in the paper, hopefully discussing all three of them in enough detail that it answers people's questions, or at least gets them thinking about it, and then they can ask for details.
Do you recall the last time we raised the per pupil? The superintendent went to meetings, Rotary meetings, they had meetings at the senior center, they had meetings at the school, they had meetings everywhere.
2007?
Steve Wymore?
That must have been Ralph.
No.
Steve Wymore.
Steve did it?
But I think it was
Steve Wymore did it.
2007 was the year that you were remembering, yeah.
And Connie Nelson also did that. And that was for when they did the improvement in the football field and those kinds of things.
Okay. And that is.
And I
also-
think Steve Wymore was the per student.
But you're saying there were school officials, school people, whether it was superintendents or teachers or.
Well, like Woody said, go to the Brink Center or something,
Yeah.
or any large gathering of people, that'd be a good opportunity.
Actually, I didn't understand the per pupil until I went to go 3 meetings. And I saw, what other places had, for example, Badger, and how long it has been since it was raised, what we used the money for. I think it was very educational, some meetings had 2 people.
Well, that's part of the plan that we're working on. But first, we need to decide what questions we're gonna ask, probably.
Well, and how much we're gonna ask.
Right,
Yeah.
yeah.
But once we get the details pounded out, then yes, we will have to present it to the public and try and sell it.
I don't remember it being raised by only $24 per pupil. I'm gonna go back and dig out all my papers.
The original was 324. And then the 300 of it went to a different account.
I think the total is 7, and don't quote me on the exact dollar amounts, let's just say $724. And then I don't remember what year it was. Part of that, let's say $300 went to what's called LOR, local operating revenue, a referendum, which allows the board to make that approval. So the LOR was 300, and the 424 was now that's the operating levy piece of it. That's the voter approved. And a few years ago, they changed it again and took $300 and put it under LOR. So now the voter approved is the $24.
And keep in mind, they did this to all the schools.
So yeah, this is statewide. So the actual dollar tax per pupil unit is, as far as the operating levy, you could say it's 744. But when we compare other districts that we're talking about, the same thing happened to them. So they have that $700 that is now board controlled, and plus the dollars that Matt showed for some of those districts like Lancaster or whatever. That's what the voters approve. So.
What's a ballpark number for total revenue for the school per year?
Was it 6 million?
Between 6 and 7 million, roughly.
You get $7,200 per kid. The APU is what they call it, average pupil unit or something.
Adjusted pupil
Adjusted
unit.
pupil unit, that's it.
How many kids do you have?
429, 428.
Oh, the drop, okay. 427.
What are the problems to build this school for about
8.
1,200
Yeah.
kids or whatever?
It was like, I think it's 12 or 1,300.
When I started here in 95, there was over 800 kids. 3 sections. Yeah.
Well, at the time, they weren't projecting the drop quite so much. I saw the original documents, and they were projecting an increase in kids, and went the other way.
But we've done a good job of utilizing the building. We have 4 daycares in the building, so.
And do the daycares pay
Yeah,
stipend?
they pay,
$100
it's 125.
It's a nominal fee.
It's a nominal, it's $100 and some a month. But it provides a service to the community. We just had to upgrade some fire alarms, and
But the school didn't pay for that.
no, we had the county, we had lots of people show up that paid for that extra
Yeah,
cost. It was
drivers
about
on the
10,000,
committee
yeah,
paid.
you know, so, yeah.
Just to finish my thought, what is our deficit right now? I mean, it's been
The
higher
102,000 roughly is,
this year, but we're still behind at that same rate.
We didn't make changes.
yeah, we did some major cuts, and I don't have it right in front of me.
So it takes, it's about 15 grand a year per student in this facility.
Mhm.
Yep.
Yeah,
to
Yep.
educate kids.
Yep.
And that's,
Yeah.
that's actually the state, that's actually pretty good.
The average was $17, wasn't it?
17,000.
Or 17,000.
Yeah, we're relatively efficient, if you can believe that. But, the surprising, you would not believe, you need to get on the finance, you need to run for county, be a board member, get on the finance committee, and you'll find out that 7 million, that's more than the county's budget. And our discretionary funds, it's in thousands, maybe tens of thousands, maybe even up to 100,000. Very little discretionary funding. Most of it is already spent as soon as you get it. And then it's salaries and operating electricity and everything else. So yeah.
They're expensive. Again, a big part of it is just you have overbuilt facility for
Yeah.
students. that we have.
that's part of it.
Because in my mind, I think, I go hire a good teacher somewhere, I say, can you handle 20 students? I'll give you 300,000 a year in your budget to take care of them. Pretty big deal, isn't it? Imagine getting 100 grand a year to only teach 20 kids.
Yeah.
And then 200,000, you know, it's just got out of control, you know. I get it, it's expensive to keep building, but
Yep.
it's a big number.
And,
plus their transportation is another huge cost.
yeah,
The number of miles we put on to,
the building's actually not as much as you might think out of that piece of pie.
Where do most of the kids go to?
Pardon me?
Where are most of the kids going that we're losing here, and the numbers are just in a shrinking community overall, or?
Our community is aging.
Yeah.
Homeschooling and war room.
Yeah.
is
Well,
what it is. We used to have a few locations, but that doesn't
Yeah.
happen anymore.
But the in and out is effectively a wash. I mean, it's not like we're losing 15 a year elsewhere and not getting them back. We're getting kids back from those communities too, which effectively wash. I don't have numbers in front of me, but we asked them last year, and it was like 14 left, and we got 13 in or something like that.
It's basically a wash.
I can bring you the numbers.
It's kind of the bigger fear is you lose another 50 kids.
But I think it's regional.
It's a big
I think
deal.
most districts, there might be some exceptions are running into it.
Young people need to start breathing this kind of.
Yeah, I mean, you saw it happen when Solvay, sold out to A&I. I mean, it changed the dynamic of the community in terms of number
But
of
it's
kids
a-
over here. It was a big drop.
It's a domino effect though. People aren't having kids because there's not enough daycare. And it's costly and it's,
State of Minnesota just put out a map, county by county, from when COVID hit, population change. Lake Lewis County got hit by the hardest with 3% loss. But your major cities gained population. It just took the rural areas and commingled them even further. But there was only like 3 counties that got the 3% or greater loss when COVID hit. And we're one of them.
Now, the ironic part is, okay, so you're saying, and I know where you were going with, I said at the previous one, where we need to try and entice people to come over here and stuff like that. Well, how do you do that? Well, you have a nice building. You have as best teachers you can get, and everything else. Well, what does that take? That takes funding. So it's a vicious circle. And I think you were also the one who had mentioned once about setting money aside for the roof, since it's roughly every 10 years. And again, that's part of it. There is very little discretionary funding with the current budget. And that's also why you gotta go we have to ask for more money and get a referendum, and then maybe we could set money aside. So.
How many, or at the next meeting, can you bring like how many kids are in each class, Jeff?
Probably got that from the last board meeting. Yeah, I was gonna say from the last meeting.
Oh, I wasn't here, so,
Thanks for coming.
thank you.
Thank you.
He gives us that though every week or every month.
No, you want just enrollment numbers or
Each classroom.
each classroom, each like math class, English, 7?
No, like kindergarten through.
Okay,
Oh,
yep,
those
We
are
do
covered
that,
every month.
yeah.
yep, I can get to that, yep.
Just out of curiosity, how much, say, I'm just using numbers. There's 80 kids in this class this year, but next year there's only 60, and then the next year there's only 50.
That's exactly what's happened.
Yep.
Right, you
And
know
what-
what I mean? So then
But you
how
look
are
at
we going
the
to?
pre-K or you
Yeah.
look at who's coming in and who's graduating.
Yep,
It's
if
got
we,
a great graph that shows
Yep.
the progression all the way through.
I can get that for you.
Thank you, I
Yep.
appreciate it.
What hurts a little school like us is you have a senior class of 40 that graduates, and then you look at your kindergarten class and there's 22,
Right.
and it's like this every year, and sometimes you have I don't know, the weather or something, and you get a few years where there's 35 or 36 kids steady, but it's what hits a little district is those enrollment changes, because
Right.
15,000, you lose 10 kids, that's $150,000 out of your budget
Absolutely.
that you
Well,
that's
an
hard.
example is, I worked at the hospital for many years, and when I first started working at the hospital, there would be almost 80 births a year, and by the time I left, there was less than 30. And so some people were going other places to deliver their babies, and some was just, simply there was not as many births.
Hey, you're preaching to the choir, so, just like us, having a cabin business, it's just like from one year to the next, you don't know.
Yeah.
where you're gonna be. And so, no, I totally get that 110%.
I was just talking about the population shift,
Yeah.
you know.
Yeah, no, I get it.
So should we set it, anything else? Should we set a date or?
Set a date.
Next week.
I'd say we have to do it fairly early. Yes.
Next week, too soon.
No, I'm thinking almost weekly meetings,
The 18th, should we do it Thursday?
next Thursday.
Right after the other meeting, at the same time?
What other meeting?
Oh, that's next month, sorry, the one we just had, May 9th. Yeah. Apologize.
Is there a meeting on
The buildings and grounds we just had.
Oh.
5:30.
I knew
On the
one Thursday.
18th? You're talking?
Yeah.
18th.
Yeah, 5:30 should work.
Okay,
Thursday, 4/18 at 5:30 PM.
Thursday, April 18th.
Another working session, right?
It's a working session. It'll be very informal like this. I'm gonna get complaints because all the comments people won't hear when it's streamed, so this is what we're gonna do. I might stick some mics over by people, so when you're asking questions, making comments, people at home can hear it, so. Supposed to cover for Don, but
Working late, won't you?
I will be,
Working hours now.
yeah.
Had it done at 5.
So I might be in blue jeans.
The other one was like,
Sweatshirt, so
we gotta go.
I gotta dress up.
Like an 18-hour day for me.
All right. All right, thanks everyone.